Mark and Laura Stevens seemed like the perfect Christian couple, devoted to their faith and family, until a hidden secret between Laura and her own father-in-law tore their lives apart, unleashing a deadly betrayal that shocked an entire community. In the heart of a quiet suburban town stood a modest yet charming house that belonged to the Stevens family. On the surface, they seemed like the perfect example of a close-knit Christian family. Mark Stevens, a successful businessman in his early 40s, was respected by many for his dedication to his work and his strong moral values. His wife, Laura, was known in the community as a kind and devoted woman who faithfully attended church every Sunday and was active in various church activities. Their teenage daughter, Emily, was a bright student, involved in school clubs, and known for her gentle nature. Together, they projected an image of peace and harmony. Mark and Laura's marriage, as far as the outside world could see, was strong and loving. They had met in church during their youth and married soon after college, building a life around shared beliefs and common goals. Mark's parents lived just a few blocks away, and family gatherings were frequent, with Harold Stevens, Mark's father, often joining in. Harold was a retired pastor, a man who had once been the spiritual leader of the community. His reputation was impeccable, and many saw him as a wise and gentle figure, a man who had dedicated his life to serving others. The Stevens family attended the same church every Sunday, where Mark sometimes gave guest speeches and Laura taught Sunday school. The family was active in charity work, volunteering to help the less fortunate. Their faith seemed to guide every decision they made. The neighbors admired them, often using the Stevens as an example of what a Christian family should be. At community events, Mark and Laura were seen together, smiling and chatting, always gracious and kind. Despite this picture-perfect exterior, there were small signs that something was off. Laura had started to withdraw from some social activities and was often quiet during family dinners. Mark, preoccupied with expanding his business, had been traveling more frequently and spending less time at home. Their daughter Emily noticed the change but attributed it to the stress of growing up and the pressures of school. She sensed her mother was troubled but didn't want to ask questions that might upset the delicate balance at home. Harold, the retired pastor, was a regular visitor, often staying for long afternoons. Mark appreciated his father's presence and advice, especially during difficult times at work. Harold was a man of strong opinions and a commanding presence, often sharing his views on faith and family. His visits were supposed to bring comfort, but Laura found herself growing uneasy whenever he was around alone. She couldn't explain why, but attention seemed to fill the rooms when it was just the two of them in private moments. Laura struggled with feelings she had never expected to have. Her marriage, once full of hope and joy, now felt suffocating. Mark's long hours and emotional distance left her feeling lonely and forgotten. The church activities and charity work she once found fulfilling now seemed like distractions from the emptiness inside. She craved connection, understanding, and affection, things she no longer found with her husband. Harold, sensing her vulnerability, began to offer more attention than a father-in-law typically would. At first, it was small gestures, a comforting hand on her shoulder during difficult days, sympathetic words about the struggles of marriage and faith. Gradually, these gestures became more frequent and intimate. Laura was caught off guard by the kindness and attention, something she desperately needed but had not admitted to herself. No one else in the family noticed these subtle changes. Mark continued to trust his father implicitly, never suspecting the growing closeness between Harold and Laura. Emily remained silent, unsure if her observations were simply a child's imagination or something more real. The church community continued to see the Stevens as a model family, unaware of the cracks slowly forming beneath the surface. The neighborhood was peaceful, the kind where people left doors unlocked and children played freely in yards. But within the walls of the Stevens home, secrets began to take root, secrets that threatened to unravel everything. What started as a small seed of forbidden comfort would soon grow into something dangerous, shaking the very foundation of the family. Laura's inner conflict deepened as she battled guilt and confusion. Her faith taught her about loyalty, forgiveness, and sin, but her heart struggled with desires she could not ignore. Harold's presence became both a solace and a source of torment. Every time they met, a silent understanding passed between them, a dangerous connection that could destroy lives if revealed. As the weeks turned into months, Laura and Harold's secret became harder to conceal. They found excuses to be alone, under the pretense of helping with household chores, church preparations, or family matters. The moments they shared were brief but intense, filled with a mixture of longing, fear, and regret. The risk of discovery hung over them like a dark cloud. Despite her efforts to keep the secret hidden, Laura felt the weight of the lie growing heavier. She worried about her daughter and the life they had built. The once peaceful home was now a place of silent tension and unspoken truths. Mark, unaware of the storm brewing around him, continued his daily routine, trusting that everything was as it seemed. The story of the Stevens family was no longer one of simple faith and family values. It had become a tale of secrets, betrayal, and the dangerous consequences of hidden desires. What began as a quiet suburban life was on the brink of tragedy, a tragedy that would shock the community and change their lives forever. As the seasons changed, the fragile calm that once cloaked the Stevens household began to dissolve. What had started as fleeting moments of quiet companionship between Laura and Harold soon deepened into something neither of them could easily explain or control. Their interactions, once innocent and framed by family obligation, became charged with a tension that neither dared to acknowledge openly. Laura found herself craving the presence of Harold more frequently. His visits, which had been routine, became the highlights of her otherwise lonely days. She told herself it was only because he was family and a source of support during difficult times. But beneath that justification lay a complicated web of emotions, comfort, guilt, and an undeniable attraction she had never expected to feel for her father-in-law. Harold, too, seemed changed. The dignified and gentle pastor that the community revered was now a man wrestling with his own desires and regrets. Behind his calm exterior lurked a restless soul, one who had felt forgotten and powerless in recent years. His wife had passed away some time ago, leaving him isolated in the house that once bustled with family life. The growing connection with Laura awakened something inside him, an intoxicating mix of passion and control that clouded his judgment. Their secret meetings became more frequent and urgent. Late afternoons in the garden, quiet walks around the neighborhood, and stolen moments in empty rooms became their refuge from the world. The risk of discovery heightened the intensity, binding them together with a dangerous thrill. Each time they met, they exchanged more than words. There were lingering glances and fleeting touches that betrayed the depth of their forbidden connection. That Laura's guilt, however, was a constant companion. Her faith, which had always been a guiding light, now felt like a heavy burden. She was torn between the love and loyalty she owed her husband and the feelings she could not deny for Harold. Every prayer she whispered in church echoed with pleas for forgiveness and clarity, but her heart remained conflicted. Mark, consumed by work and unaware of the turmoil inside his own home, began to notice subtle changes in Laura. She seemed distracted, often lost in thought, and occasionally withdrawn. At first, he attributed it to stress or fatigue, offering words of encouragement that were met with polite smiles but little warmth. Their once easy conversations grew strained, filled with pauses and unspoken worries. Emily, too, was affected by the shifting dynamics. The bright, cheerful girl had become quieter, her eyes often searching for answers no one was willing to give. She sensed the distance growing between her parents and noticed the odd familiarity between her mother and grandfather that made her uneasy. But afraid of breaking the fragile peace, she kept her thoughts to herself, locking away her concerns. In the privacy of her room, within the church community, the Stevens family continued to maintain their image of respectability. Laura kept up appearances, volunteering diligently and participating in every event. Mark remained an active member, often speaking about faith and family values. Yet beneath the polished surface, whispers began to circulate, subtle rumors and sideways glances that hinted something was amiss. Harold, despite his outward calm, grew increasingly possessive. The relationship that once offered comfort now fueled darker desires. He wanted to control Laura's every move, to keep her close and away from the rest of the world. His visits lengthened, and his tone shifted from gentle guidance to sharp insistence. Laura found herself caught in a web of manipulation and fear, unsure how to break free. The tension reached a breaking point when Mark, by chance, stumbled upon a message on Laura's phone, an innocent-looking note that nonetheless set off alarms in his mind. Though it contained nothing explicit, the unfamiliarity of the sender and the secrecy around it sparked a quiet suspicion. He began to watch Laura more closely, his trust wavering but not yet broken. Laura, sensing the walls closing in, tried to pull back from Harold, but the emotional and psychological hold he had over her made it nearly impossible. She feared losing her family, her standing in the church, and most of all, the fragile peace she clung to. Her prayers became desperate cries for guidance, but answers never came. Emily, in her own way, tried to protect the family. She avoided confrontations and kept silent about what she suspected. But the strain was visible in her schoolwork and her moods, signaling the emotional toll the situation was taking on her young shoulders. Harold's grip tightened further when he learned Mark was beginning to suspect something. The man who had once been a respected elder in the community was now a man driven by jealousy and desperation. He saw Mark as an obstacle, someone who stood between him and the woman he had grown obsessed with. As the web of deceit grew thicker, so did the danger. The Stevens home, once a sanctuary of faith and love, had become a place of secrets and silent suffering. The family's foundation was cracking, hidden behind closed doors and forced smiles. The stage was set for a tragedy that would shake the community and expose the dark underbelly of a family bound by appearances but torn apart by betrayal. No one could have predicted how far Harold's obsession would go or the devastating cost it would exact on everyone involved. The story of Laura and Harold was no longer a quiet secret. It was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, threatening to destroy the lives of those who had once trusted and loved each other deeply. That Mark's world began to unravel on an ordinary evening when he returned home earlier than planned. The air was heavy with rain, the kind of steady downpour that blurred the edges of the familiar suburban streets and muffled the usual sounds of life. Mark was exhausted from a long day at the office, but was looking forward to a quiet night with his family. What he found, however, shattered any hope of normalcy. As he stepped into the house, the tension was palpable. The front door was slightly ajar, unusual for a man so cautious about security. A low murmur of voices came from the living room, soft, urgent, but strained. Mark's heart quickened as he followed the sound. There, standing face to face, were his wife Laura and his father Harold. Neither spoke when Mark entered. Instead, the room filled with a heavy silence that screamed louder than any words that Mark's eyes took in the scene. The subtle avoidance of eye contact, the tightness in Laura's jaw, the rigid posture of Harold. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The trust that had once been unshakable now seemed fragile and cracked. Though no confession was made, Mark's instincts told him the betrayal was real. In the days that followed, Mark struggled to make sense of what he had seen. He confronted Laura, searching for answers, but her responses were evasive, filled with half-truths and vague reassurances. She promised him it was nothing, that the closeness with Harold was a source of comfort during stressful times, but the doubt had taken root. Mark's faith in his wife began to waver, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that ate away at his peace. Harold, on the other hand, grew colder and more distant. The grandfatherly figure who had once been a pillar of the family transformed into a shadow lurking in the background, his presence unsettling rather than comforting. He began to spread subtle rumors within the church community, insinuating that Laura was unfaithful to Mark. The whispers reached Mark's ears through concerned friends and church members, adding another layer of complexity and pain. The community, once supportive and admiring, now watched the Stevens family with wary eyes. Gossip spread like wildfire, and the family's reputation, built on years of trust and respect, began to crumble. Mark found himself isolated, torn between loyalty to his father and disbelief over his wife's possible betrayal. Laura's inner turmoil intensified. The guilt of the secret affair consumed her, but she also feared Harold's increasing possessiveness. He had begun to control her movements, dictating who she could see and where she could go. What had started as an escape from loneliness had spiraled into a prison of fear and manipulation. Emily, caught in the middle, observed the unraveling with silent horror. The once lively teenager became withdrawn, burdened by secrets she was too young to fully understand. She felt torn between her love for her parents and the confusing reality unfolding before her. Her grades slipped, and she avoided friends and activities, retreating into herself. The cracks in the family widened until one fateful night when Harold's desperation reached a dangerous peak. Consumed by jealousy and a twisted sense of possession, he devised a plan to eliminate the obstacle standing between him and Laura, his son Mark. Under the cloak of darkness, Harold set his plan into motion. The details were chilling. A staged car accident designed to look like a tragic mishap. But fate intervened in unexpected ways. The crash did not claim Mark's life as intended. Instead, Laura was caught in the wreck, sustaining critical injuries. That left her fighting for survival. Emergency services rushed Laura to the hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to save her. The community was shaken by the news. The Stevens family, once admired for their faith and unity, was now the center of a dark and disturbing scandal. Initial investigations treated the accident as just that, an accident. But small inconsistencies and overlooked details began to emerge. A few neighbors recalled seeing Harold's car near the scene earlier that evening, and strange behaviors by Harold himself raised suspicions among those closest to the family. Emily, despite her youth, sensed the truth beneath the surface. She began to share her concerns with a trusted teacher, who encouraged her to speak up. Slowly, the police reopened the investigation, peeling back layers of deception. The evidence uncovered a tangled web of lies, manipulation, and dangerous obsession. Harold's affair with Laura was exposed, alongside his failed attempt to murder his own son. The church community reeled in shock, struggling to reconcile the man they had revered with the person the investigation revealed. Mark, though devastated by the betrayal and violence, was determined to seek justice. His relationship with both his father and wife was forever changed, replaced by a cautious resolve to protect what remained of his family. Laura's recovery was slow and painful. The physical wounds were severe, but the emotional scars ran deeper. She faced not only the trauma of the attack, but the consequences of her secret and its fallout. Yet, in the darkest moments, she found a glimmer of hope. Faith, once shaken, began to provide the strength to heal and move forward. Emily, having endured the storm, emerged with a newfound courage. Her voice, once silenced by fear and confusion, became a beacon of truth. The Stevens family story served as a grim reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered and how dangerous secrets can become when left unchecked. The tragedy had exposed the worst in people and tested the limits of forgiveness, faith, and resilience. It was a story that would haunt the community for years to come, a story of betrayal, obsession, and survival. After the crash that nearly claimed Laura's life, the Stevens household was enveloped in a suffocating silence. The once vibrant home, filled with laughter and shared faith, now felt cold and empty. Laura lay in a hospital bed, fragile and barely conscious, her body battered but her spirit fighting to hold on. Mark sat beside her, overwhelmed with guilt and confusion, struggling to reconcile the loving wife he had known with the woman caught in a deadly secret. Harold's calm demeanor began to slip away, revealing cracks in the carefully maintained facade. The man who had once been a pillar of wisdom and faith now seemed haunted, his eyes shadowed with guilt and fear. He tried to maintain his role within the family and church, but his presence was increasingly met with suspicion and unease. Investigators, prompted by new evidence and Emily's brave decision to speak out, reopened the case surrounding the accident. What was initially ruled a tragic mishap soon revealed troubling inconsistencies. The placement of skid marks, the timing of Harold's movements, and forensic evidence on the vehicle painted a darker picture. Slowly but surely, a theory emerged. The crash had not been an accident at all. That Emily's testimony became crucial. Despite her youth and the emotional weight she carried, she spoke clearly about the strained relationship between her mother and grandfather, the unusual visits, and the growing tension she had witnessed. Her courage gave investigators the breakthrough they needed. As the investigation deepened, more details about Harold's involvement in the family's turmoil came to light. It became clear that his desire for control and his obsession with Laura had driven him to dangerous extremes. His betrayal was not limited to the affair. It extended into manipulation, deceit, and a murderous plan that shocked the entire community. The church, once a sanctuary for the Stevens family, now found itself grappling with the scandal. Harold's past as a pastor added a layer of betrayal that cut deeply into the congregation. Members struggled to understand how a man devoted to God could commit such acts. The church leadership moved swiftly, removing Harold from all duties and initiating disciplinary actions. Many members left, unable to reconcile their faith with the actions of their former spiritual leader. Mark faced his own battles. He wrestled with anger and sorrow, torn between his roles as husband, son, and father. The betrayal from both his wife and father was a wound that would not easily heal. Yet, amidst the pain, he found determination. He sought counseling for himself and Emily, hoping to rebuild their fractured family and find a path forward. Laura's recovery was long and grueling. Physical therapy tested her strength, while therapy sessions confronted the emotional damage. She faced public judgment and private shame. Her affair and the circumstances of the crash laid bare for all to see. But through it all, she clung to her faith, seeking forgiveness and healing. The community watched as the Stevens family navigated the aftermath. Some offered support, others whispered judgment. The story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers lurking behind closed doors and the consequences of secrets kept in the shadows. Harold's trial was a spectacle, drawing attention far beyond the small town. Prosecutors painted a picture of a man consumed by obsession and willing to destroy everything to possess what he could not rightfully have. Evidence of the affair, his attempts to manipulate the family, and the staged accident left little doubt of his guilt. During the trial, it was revealed that Harold's actions were not impulsive but planned, driven by a twisted sense of entitlement and control. His betrayal of faith, family, and law was complete. The verdict was swift and decisive, guilty of attempted murder and other charges. Harold was sentenced to many years in prison. The conclusion of the trial marked a turning point. For Mark and Laura, it was the beginning of a difficult journey toward healing. Forgiveness was not immediate, nor was trust easily restored. Yet, the family began to find strength in their brokenness, leaning on each other and their faith to rebuild. Emily, having endured so much at a young age, emerged resilient. Her bravery in speaking out helped bring justice and set a powerful example for others caught in similar situations. The family's story, though painful, became one of survival and hope. The Stevens household, once a symbol of perfect Christian family life, was forever changed. The shadows cast by betrayal and violence could never be fully erased, but through pain and struggle, the family learned that even shattered faith and broken bonds could be mended with time, truth, and love. The story of Laura's secret affair with her father-in-law and the deadly consequences that followed served as a chilling reminder. Sometimes, the greatest dangers lie not in strangers, but within the very people we trust the most. In the months that followed Harold's conviction, the Stevens family faced a new reality, one filled with uncertainty, pain, and the difficult work of healing. The once tightly woven fabric of their lives had been torn apart by betrayal and violence, leaving behind threads that needed careful mending. Mark and Laura, scarred but determined, began the painstaking process of rebuilding their marriage and their family. Laura's physical recovery had progressed steadily, but the emotional wounds ran far deeper. The shame of her affair, compounded by the violent attack orchestrated by Harold, left her grappling with feelings of guilt and confusion. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, providing a safe space to confront her mistakes and the complex emotions surrounding the events that had nearly destroyed her family. Mark, too, sought help to process his own pain. The betrayal by the two people he had trusted most in the world challenged his understanding of love and loyalty. Yet, through counseling and faith, he found a path toward forgiveness, not just of Laura, but also himself. He realized that healing would not be swift or simple, but required patience and grace. Emily, having carried so much burden as a teenager, showed remarkable resilience. The trauma she endured had left scars, but it also strengthened her resolve. She threw herself into her studies and extracurricular activities, determined to create a future beyond the shadows of her family's scandal. With the support of her parents, she slowly reclaimed her confidence and sense of normalcy. The community, which had once rallied around the Stevens family, remained divided. Some members embraced the family's efforts to move forward, offering support and understanding. Others remained skeptical, their judgment lingering in whispered conversations and sidelong glances. The church itself faced the challenge of healing. From the wounds Harold's betrayal had inflicted, grappling with issues of trust and accountability within its leadership. Mark and Laura chose to keep their faith at the center of their recovery. They returned to the church pews with humility and renewed commitment, determined to rebuild their spiritual lives even as they acknowledged the fractures in their past. Their story became one of redemption, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the strength found in vulnerability. In private moments, Mark and Laura reflected on the choices that had brought them to this point. Laura's affair, born from loneliness and desperation, had nearly cost them everything. Harold's obsession had shattered the family and exposed dangerous faults beneath a polished surface. Yet, through these trials, they discovered truths about themselves and each other that would shape their future. Harold's imprisonment brought a complicated mix of emotions. While justice had been served, the knowledge that he remained part of their lives, however distant, was a constant reminder of the pain he caused. The family grappled with conflicting feelings of anger, sorrow, and, for some, a lingering hope that even Harold could find repentance. The legal battle also had lasting consequences for the church community. Leadership implemented stricter safeguards and accountability measures to prevent such abuses of power in the future. The scandal served as a wake-up call, prompting difficult conversations about trust, secrecy, and the human failings that can hide behind faith. For the Stevens family, the journey was far from over. The scars of betrayal would remain, but so would the bonds forged through shared hardship. Mark and Laura learned to communicate with honesty, rebuilding trust one day at a time. Emily found her voice again, using her experience to advocate for others facing family trauma. Their story became more than just a tale of crime and betrayal. It became a story of survival, resilience, and the complicated nature of forgiveness. It reminded those who heard it that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found, and broken families could find ways to heal. The quiet suburban house where the Stevens family had once lived a life of seeming perfection now stood as a symbol of both the fragility and strength of human relationships. Behind its walls were lessons about the dangers of secrecy, the destructive power of obsession, and the enduring capacity for redemption. Christian faith, which had once been the backdrop for betrayal and tragedy, now served as the foundation for recovery. The Stevens family's experience showed that faith is not about perfection but about grace, grace to forgive, to heal, and to move forward despite the scars of the past. As the years passed, the Stevens family slowly reclaimed their lives. Though the shadows of the past never fully disappeared, they no longer controlled the present. Their story remained a powerful reminder that even when trust is broken and love betrayed, there is always a chance to rebuild and to find peace once more.